Welcome back, everybody. You know, in the quest for progress, our country really doesn't seem to have a problem throwing the most vulnerable people under that same wheel of progress to just kind of keep it driving forward. We want to talk about spending cuts, but at the same time, the first thing we go for apparently is going to be the social safety nets that keep people afloat. And it's a shame.
Last night, we looked at the House Republican plan for Medicaid in the Trump legislative agenda. Tonight, we focus on another program facing sweeping reform and cuts in that budget bill. That's SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, once known as food stamps. The anti-hunger program reaches more than 41 million low-income Americans who receive an average of about $187 in food benefits each month. The Congressional Budget Office projects proposed changes would save billions of dollars, but millions of people would no longer be eligible for the program.
I know there's a lot of people that say that $187 a month isn't a big deal, but $187 worth of subsidized food for people who can barely afford to feed themselves, feed their families, feed their children is life-changing, and is the difference between a child going to bed with a full stomach or an empty stomach.
Our Lisa Desjardins is here. So, Lisa, what cuts do House Republicans want to make to this program?
These would be the most sweeping reductions in this program since the Food Stamp Act was passed in 1964. House Republicans, one, would make states pay more for this, and number two, implement more requirements so eventually fewer people would benefit. First of all, those requirements are work requirements, and they would apply to more people. They would now force states to pay a share of this program, and they would limit the beneficiaries to U.S. citizens only. All in all, that would save just under $300 billion, according to the Congressional Budget Office. That is money that House Republicans would use to pay for tax cuts in this bill.
And what impact might the work requirement have?
It's significant. Now, the focus here is on the most stringent work requirement under SNAP, and that is for able-bodied people right now who don't have dependents. It's 80 hours a month. That can be work or volunteering. So let's look at how they're expanding it, because the age is what has been expanding in this requirement. In 2022, this requirement was for people up to age 49, but then it changed so that currently it is required of people up to age 54. House Republicans would expand it again by more so that everyone up to age 64 under this program would be required to meet those 80 hours a month. It also would change for people with children. Right now, if you have a child, you are not required to meet this 80 hours of work, but the House plan would require you to do it if you have a child who is 7 years old or more. Also mentioning, if you're a married couple, only one person in the marriage has to do the work requirement. So if you're a single parent, you have to do that, and you're also single parenting. All right, so what does that mean overall? The numbers, let's take a look. The Congressional Budget Office says these work requirements would save about $100 billion, and that's largely because more than 3 million people would be out of the program as a result. Most of them are adults without children, and states would not be able to create waivers to keep them in. Now, even though these are adults that are coming off of the program, CBO believes as an indirect effect, something like 400,000 kids would lose school lunches as well, though conservatives question that.
So those are the numbers. What's the underlying debate that's fueling all of this?
This is a very classic ideological and intense academic debate as well. For conservatives, what's central here is how to get out of the cycle of poverty. They see safety net programs as an entry point into that cycle. They want more self-sufficiency. So we talk to experts who believe—
You want to talk about self-sufficiency, but that self-sufficiency in a time where opportunity at its lowest, people are waiting months and months and months to get jobs. The jobs that are being offered out there are paying on what we're still taught that a good wage is $20 to $25 an hour. But as we'll see in another video soon, that leaves you with essentially $100 at the end of the month if you're single. And again, we're brushing over the fact that 400,000 kids in this country would lose their school lunches. And for a lot of those kids, that's the one guaranteed meal that they know that they're going to have in the day, because when they go home at night, especially if their SNAP program, the food stamps are going out the window. Now they just don't even know if they're going to have food when they get home. This increases childhood food insecurity for millions of households. And to put work requirements on a population that can't get jobs just seems cruel, because there's no ability for them to actually meet these work requirements, especially if you have so much going on. Not, there's this misconception that everybody who's on SNAP, everybody who's on EBT, everybody who's on food stamps is lazy, is a leech, is, just feeding off the system. But most of these people are on these programs in between jobs. They're not typically people who are on them all the time. It's just in between jobs. And that's when you need it. That's when you need help. And heading into a deep recession where we're already seeing the job market cool down, massive layoffs that are hitting millions of people per month, while at the same time only 100,000 jobs or so are being created per month. This is the exact time where programs like SNAP, programs like Section 8, programs like EBT, whatever, Medicare, Medicaid, that's when they use them too, is during those transition periods. This is a time, we're going into a time where these things are absolutely necessary and they're just not going to be there for people.
That the work requirement here is not too much of a burden for SNAP. And specifically, we spoke to Angela Rashidi of the right-leaning AEI.
The participation rate among eligibles is close to 90%. In some states, it's even 100%. And so SNAP is available. It's robust. I think a very small work requirement that can be satisfied through things even like volunteering. I don't think that's an expectation that's too high for much of this population.
Now, they think that this is something that's helpful, getting people more to work. But on the left, they see the exact reverse here. They think that these safety net programs are something that help people survive and get strength so that they can get back to work, get more self-sufficient. They think that work requirements, what they do is they hurt people while they're trying to get on their feet. And they point out that many people who are on SNAP are in between jobs, looking for jobs right now. We spoke to Lauren Bauer, who is with the left-leaning Brookings Institution.
SNAP work requirements punish the unemployed. Searching for jobs, for work, is not an allowable use of your time when you're being subject to SNAP work requirements. And so what we end up doing is punishing people who can't find a job within 3 months. During recessions, that is the vast, vast majority of people who become enrolled in the program.
It's also harder on older Americans as well in the workforce. Now, there is not a lot of research that really pins down what happens with these work requirements. There is economic theory that there is a kind of demotivating factor if you don't have a work requirement. But on the other hand, there's empirical evidence that says people who are unemployed and get SNAP benefits find better and longer lasting jobs.
Of course you would find a better, longer lasting job because you actually don't have to rush and get the first job that you can. Not all these jobs are the same. And like I said, a lot of the jobs out there, what are they offering? $15, $20, $25 an hour. But with the inflation that we've seen over the past few years, with the economy how it is today, with the impact of the tariffs, with the prices of everything going up, it's just those jobs don't do anything anymore. And especially long term, what they're going to do is maybe keep a roof over your head and make sure that you can feed yourself. But at the same time, long term growth goes out the window when necessity is driving you to keep yourself in survival.
And the other Republican goal here is to push more responsibility for this program to the states.
That's right. And this is a big deal. It is a sea change. What's happening here is right now, states do not pay anything for the benefits on SNAP. But starting in 2028, under this proposal, states would pay at least 5%. And that would increase if the states have a higher error rate. So what we're talking about right now is those are states with the higher error rates currently is 25, about half of the country. They would pay 25% of the benefits in their state. There's some time to work out the error issues here, but just this week, Wisconsin, which has a low error rate, said that this would cost it hundreds of millions of dollars and sent out a warning about that.
And we should explain what that means. What's an error rate?
An error rate means that you have paid someone on SNAP too much or too little.
Got it. I want to ask you, with Elon Musk's time in government coming to an end this week, what's the future of the Doge austerity plan? I know you've reported on that extensively on the Hill.
Well, some things, like, for example, the reorganization of the State Department and USAID are moving. The State Department just transmitted that plan to Congress today. But other things, like the cuts, which frankly have sometimes been hard to track, have not been congressionally approved at all. Some members would like to do that, but I don't think the votes are there right now in the Senate. There is one thing, cuts to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, PBS and NPR. We do expect a rescission package, perhaps, I expect it, I'm told, in Congress next week, and we will follow that closely.
Lisa Desjardins, our thanks to you as always.
You're welcome.
Like I said, it's in the rush to have these cuts down that are really going to cause the biggest impacts. But the question is why? Why is there such a rush to get the biggest cuts possible? It seems to be pushed through, and I think that there's other reasons for that.
We can't do everything that everyone wants, and some people are just going to have to accept a ham and egg sandwich without the ham. We have some members of the Senate that will not get all the spending reductions they want. Here's what's driving this, Joe, and this is ultimately why I think the bill will pass. We're in uncharted waters here with the tariffs. I think the markets are telling us that. We don't know what impact they're going to have on the economy. But if we don't extend those tax cuts, we're going into a recession.
Here's my thing, though, right? If your party is putting on these tariffs and you don't know what the consequences are going to be or if it's going to absolutely destroy our economy, so instead of just getting rid of the tariffs or just making them more manageable, making them more reasonable, because, I mean, you talk about Europe, for example, by putting a 50% tariff on imports that are coming from the EU, essentially that's an embargo. There's nothing that's going to be coming in after those are implemented. Yeah, that's going to cause economic devastation. Is it necessary? No, it's absolutely unnecessary. So instead of not doing that, you're like, well, let's just cut all the social safety nets. Let's absolutely gut our domestic spending. Now let's keep the military as strong as possible. Let's increase the spending on the military. We need that. We got to make sure we have all our good defense contractors. We need all them. But free school lunches for poor kids, $187 a month for families that can't afford to feed themselves. No, that's too much. You go find a job.
And our economy is going to be on a journey to the center of the earth. And ultimately, I think that's why the bill will pass.
We're in uncharted territory, as you say, on the tariffs. We're also in uncharted territory on our national debt, $37 trillion. It's just exploded exponentially over the past 20 years or so.
Yep.
Do you have any hope that Congress can be responsible, that the House and the Senate can somehow figure out how to at least bend the line where we start moving back toward a balanced budget?
Sure. I mean, I'm an optimist. I'm a paranoid optimist. But in the last year, certainly the last 100 to 150 days, the conversation up here has changed. Under President Biden, the conversation was basically who needs to pay more in taxes. The conversation now, really on both sides of the aisle, quietly more of the Democrats, is what the hell happened to the money? Elon Musk makes a valid point. We have become, or will become, if we don't do something about it, debt slaves.
I think it's ludicrous to even ask the question where the money is when we see the largest wealth disparity this country has ever had. You're talking about somebody like Elon Musk, somebody who has more wealth than 50% of the population of the United States, and you have the nerve to ask yourself where the money went. We know where the money has went over the past few decades as it leaves the working class, as it leaves the working poor, and trickles its way straight up to the richest people in America. Like, this isn't hard to see, but when you're in that class, when you're in that social class that you've been getting all that money, you're not going to see it because it's normal. It doesn't go back in the pockets of the working class. The middle class has been decimated. The middle class is now the working class. And again, all this is just going to give tax cuts to the richest people, which is going to cause even more of a staggering wealth disparity in our country, which is going to make the standard of living in our country far worse than it already is. Our Congress and our political leadership are absolutely blinded by what is directly in front of them and not seeing the actual impacts of what's coming down the road. You want to talk about making America great, but at the same time, you're cutting the legs out from under the people who live in it. What do you expect? Because all you're going to see is unemployment and joblessness go through the roof, and the levels of desperation in the American population absolutely boom. In a population that's already stressed out and can't afford to live as it is, you're going to go ahead and take away their food stamps, take away their Medicaid, take away their rental assistance. Yeah, we beat on about this again and again and again because it's in process right now. And like the good gentleman right here just said, it's going to pass. It's just we have people who are holding up because they want to cut more. Because that's the thing, a lot of these people, they want to get these programs out the door completely, just get rid of them. Not just cut the spending, but just get rid of them completely. And who's this going to affect the most? Because it's not going to be the cities as much as it is rural populations. Populations of people who voted for these people to enact these bills don't realize that in some of these areas, 40, 50, 60% of the voter base are actually on one form or another of these social programs and depend on them to live, depend on them to pay their rent, depend on them for their food, depend on them for their medical care. I don't see how this actually doesn't cause more of a public outcry. I don't see how it's just a few of us online apparently who see it. And it's good to see maybe it's starting to work its way into the mainstream media, that they're actually acknowledging that some of these problems might actually arise. But at the same time, there's no one who's actually doing about it in the opposition. It's just not. No one's holding anything up. This is just, it's a mess. But I think at this point, we just need to learn about preparedness. And, you know, and like he said, and something I do agree with, because we are debt slaves as a country already. I mean, it's programmed into us from an early age that we're going to take on debt, that debt is normal, good debt. And a lot of people don't tell themselves no. You know, they'll just go ahead and get things that they don't need. America, we are a consuming culture, and part of being a consuming culture is you are also a debt culture. And that's where we're at now. So I think one of the things we need to do as a population is really turn down the personal spending. Now, I know that seems ludicrous statement because you're like, well, the only thing that I have are my bills. This is what I pay. As soon as I get paid, it goes to my bills. It goes to pay off my student loans. It goes to pay off my rent, my mortgage. I don't have any extra money. And I think that's a good point because that's most people in America now. Most people in America now don't have money that they're just spending frivolously, and this idea that they are, I think, again, supports this kind of ideology that says we just need to cut these programs because these people, you know, they're actually lazy, and it's their own fault that they're in the position where they need these social programs and they can get out of it themselves. It's disgusting, it's a shame, and I don't know. But if you're still here at this point, like and subscribe. Thinking about becoming a member, we appreciate the support as always. But anyway, thank you for stopping by, everyone, and we hope you have a good one.